We start with the Mangala Prakashamane on the first page of the shlokas. For the question answer, I have a suggestion to keep it a little structured. You had 4 groups of discussion. Of course, it didn't last because afterwards we were walking, but still there was probably in every group some questions arose which would be interesting for everybody. Instead of making it completely open, maybe first those of you who were leading the groups can share or ask one of your group to share a question which was significant, which would be useful for everybody. And then we can open it, of course, to...
I put my diary in the room.
Yeah, Mike? No, even if you didn't write, I hope you remember.
Yeah, there was one which we asked you, so we can ask again.
So there was one question in our group which we wanted to explore further. How to categorize the 4 upayas? Is it based upon the effort involved, or is it based upon the instrument of effort?
Instrument? What do you mean?
Instrument of effort being knowledge or awareness, rituals.
No, this is of course a question which concerns everybody. And if you have any other, you need any other clarification, but at least I can say a little more. Basically, there is a beautiful sentence which is just quoted in our Pratibhijna Hridayam from the Ishvara Pratibhijna Karika, where Utpalas Deva says, all these methods, they have no other purpose but to remove the obstacles of the pure consciousness, and the pure consciousness doesn't need anything. It is self-luminous. So one should always start from that ultimate point of view that consciousness, even our divinity, is self-luminous. It is there. And we have to use some practice, some methods to clear the path and to clear our mind and to remove the obstacles and remove this, what in the Netra Tantra is called the granthis, those knots, etc. So the purpose of the upayas is precisely an operation of purification or preparing for that experience, which again and again we have seen it is spontaneous, it is sudden, it can be happening also without any preparation. And our task is just to clear the ground, to clear the path, to purify our life. And for that purpose there are the upayas. And the upayas are precisely when we are at the level of the body and the mind, etc., then we are still identified with the body, and then we need means which are connected with the body. So that is ritual, even mantra, and like hatha yoga, you do practices which are connected with the body, and that is all at the level of anavopaya. And there is a progress, and the beauty is it's not just the progress from anavopaya to shaktopaya, then to shambhava. It can move anywhere depending on your capacity of awareness. And so it does not, that Swamiji says it many times in his commentary on the Vijnana Bhairava, that from there, from Anavapaya, you can move directly to Shambhava. So it's not like you have to go this step and that step, and slowly you will reach. No, because precisely our consciousness is ever self-luminous. So first we have to have that conviction, and that conviction gets strengthened by our practice, gets strengthened by our meditation. Now the second, from below, the second upaya is connected with Shakti, Shaktopaya, and is connected with knowledge, Jnana Shakti, and Anavapaya with Kriya Shakti. It is activity, you do some activity at different levels. And Jnana Shakti is at the level of Shakti, at the level of Shaktopaya, and at the level of Shambhavapaya, it is Shiva himself who acts. The question is always who is the agent of the practice. So at the Anavapaya, we as individual limited beings, limited persons, we are the agent. So we have to take a resolve, we have to practice, we have to do yoga, we have to do ritual and all that. So we are the agents. And this is very important. Who is the agent? At the level of Shakta, Shakti is the agent. And that is why what we read in the Netra Tantra yesterday is so important, because it is the Shakti herself who acts and who makes you rise spiritually. So it is Shakti, and therefore also all the experience is connected with Shakti and Kundalini, etc. They also belong to the Shaktopaya, because their Shakti is the agent, Shakti is active. And then at the Shambhavapaya, it's neither the individual consciousness nor the Shakti, it is Shiva who is the agent. And that is why it is the upaya of Ichcha Shakti, of will. So if your will has to be united with the divine will, and then you don't have to interfere. You know what we often do also in our practice, and that's a danger. We interfere with that which is anyhow going on. I have told this yesterday also, that energy, we don't allow her to operate in us. So if we become transparent to that energy that is already Shaktopaya, and then if we surrender our will to the will of Shiva, Ichha Shakti, then we are in the level of Shambhava. So there's no question of effort in the sense effort belongs mainly to Anavopaya. And Shaktopaya and Shambhava are related to awareness of different degrees. And of course there is also, it's not a very clear-cut, watertight separation. You can move from one to the other, and depending on your state and your experience, etc. Now the question was raised about Anupaya. The no means, the no way. And there, Abhinavagupta and his commentator Jayarata, they say there are two meanings of Anupaya. Either Alpopaya, it is a very small means, a very minimal means. And the beautiful example they give is if you have the darshan of a siddha, of a perfect being, and you just, that darshan does everything. If you're prepared, if you have a darshan of a perfect being, of a siddha or yogini, and then nothing else is to be done, that is alpopaya. And the negation, an, can be either alpa or it can be negative, without any means. This is what we have seen in the Atulanata, where it is that spontaneity and grace. See what Swamiji says, it is your courage from your side and it is grace from the divine side. So grace is both Anugraha Shakti and Shaktipata. What is the difference? Or should I think it's useful to, yeah. So we have seen, in the morning we also spoke about the 5 acts of Shiva, and the last act is Anugraha, grace, which leads you to liberation. So that I call it the universal grace, that Anugraha Shakti is always there, whether you take hold of it or not. Like you have a whole treasure and you can leave it closed, or if you open it and you can use it, then that is always ready. Shiva is always ready to give you grace. Only we are not always ready to receive it. So that is a general grace. And then when it becomes a experience, it is called Shaktipata. So Shaktipata is grace which assumes the form of a sudden being overwhelmed by that divine energy, or whatever form it takes. It can take many forms. Or that you receive the Shaktipata from a realized guru. So that is the particular grace which not everybody is ready for Shaktipata. Not everybody has the fortune also to receive it. But Anugraha is there for everybody. So this is at the level of Anupaya, where it is grace which operates. Or you have a very brief, what I would call a triggering of the experience is just when you have a darshan of Siddha and you're ready, you're prepared. And then it's finished. Nothing more to be done. That is Anupaya.
So we actually had a related question. The relationship between grace and karma, if there is one. What is it in light of Kashmir?
So this is also related to our session also, we had the same question.
Same question.
Same question.
Yes.
I think the question was, are there any preconditions
Preconditions.
for the undeserving grace to be bestowed?
Yeah. But this is a very important question for everybody, because we are very much used to be told that you have to reap your karma and you have your burden with so much karma from your previous lives and so on and so on. So it is, karma is very predominant in a lot of Indian spirituality. But I must say in Abhinavagupta and these authors, and starting from the tantras themselves, the determining factor for your spiritual development, spiritual life is not karma, not necessarily karma. But as we have just been talking about grace. So the question is, of course, coming back to the upayas, that you are the upayas are at different levels of consciousness. And those different levels of consciousness, you may say, depend on your karma. So if you have very good karma from previous birth, and then it's much easier, or the other way around. But I must say, compared to other texts and schools, I found very little discussion on karma, on the mechanism of karma, that this much of karma, and then what is the result, and what you have to do, this kind of practice to overcome. I find very little in those texts. They stress more on grace. That is very clear. Yeah,
So the malas are related, the impurities are related to the karma.
Mm?
So can we relate the karmas and the impurities, malas?
Yes, yes. Now, of course, we are pure consciousness, but we are not ready for that. So there are the impurities which prevent us from attaining that state. So there are these 3 malas. Did you discuss in a group?
No, we didn't discuss it, but please explain.
Yeah, the impurities, it is in the whole of Shaivism, you have this doctrine of the 3 malas, the impurities, which are again at the different levels of the anava, maya and karma. Now karma, mala, is an impurity caused by karma. And maya, mala, is caused by the illusory force of maya. And anava, mala, is caused by your sense of individuality, or identifying yourself with the body, etc. Now, the difference between the understanding of malas in the non-dualistic tradition and in the dualistic Shaiva tradition is the dualistic Shaivas, who are called the Shaiva Siddhanta, they believe that the malas are substantial. They are substantial to the soul. And for purifying that substance, you need initiation, you need a lot of ritual, and they always compare it, if you have a cataract in the eye, you cannot wish it away by knowledge, you have to operate it. And the operation has to be done by ritual, by initiation, etc. This is in the dualistic. But in the non-dualistic Shaivism, the 3 malas, they can be overcome by knowledge. And they are not substantial, they are superficial to the, because the Svarupa, our true nature is divine, as we have seen in the morning. It's only a question of recognizing our true nature. So the malas cannot prevent us ultimately from this recognition. They can only veil it for the time being, or and then they can be overcome by knowledge. You don't need to do a lot of ritual and to purify those malas. But of course, that's a big topic, which is important. But as I say, the karma mala also, it is not a determining. See, often we understand karma as something which is determining. Oh, I'm doing this because it's my karma, I cannot escape that. This is not at all. There is certain influence, but it's not determining your state of, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Just to add to the karma and grace relationship, Jainism and Buddhism texts are replete with examples where someone who has been terrible, who has had very bad karma, in a moment of realization is bestowed with grace. And then even though he or she has to bear the influence or the consequences of his or her karma, that moment of grace, that realization which leads to grace, becomes like a boat over which you have the strength and you have the way to therefore counter the effects of whatever your karma holds. My question actually, Bettina G, was on the 4 ways of samadhi you said there, where you mentioned 4 ways of samadhi. Could you repeat those, please?
I didn't bring the text. Because the Neta Tantra didn't bring the Neta Tantra, so I have to speak from my memory. Kshemaraja, who comments on the Neta Tantra, he relates the 4. Oh, sorry. He relates the 4 ways of samadhi to the 4 upayas. That is very interesting. But now I would have to have the text, I don't know if I have. Somebody has brought the Netra Tantra? No, the Netra Tantra book, if anybody has it. Yeah? Yeah. Yes, thank you. So he connects the 4 ways of forms of samadhi with the 4 upayas. Like the first, fixing one's mind equally in all beings is called samadhana. Free from mental representations. This is called true samadhana, all else is merely befooling the people. And Kshemaraja says that this is anava samadhi, consisting in the meditative means, fixing one's mind equally in all beings. So that how far it is anava, I mean, of course we accept Kshemaraja's classification, but it's not so easy to identify it with anava. Then the next is shakta. When one has a sense of equality for all beings in this world, seeing oneself and others as equal, contemplating thus, I am Shiva, I am free from duality. Shivoham advitiyoham. This is called the highest state of samadhi. Highest not as the very highest, it is Shakta. It belongs to Shaktopaya, in the sense that this meditation, Shivoham Advitiyoham, it belongs to the Shaktopaya. I am Shiva, I am free from duality. And this becomes like a kind of mantra which can be used for meditation in the Shaktopaya. And for Samadhi, of course. So both are very close in the sense that both have a lot to do with compassion, with a unity consciousness with all beings at different levels. But the purpose is the same, to feel the unity, the oneness with all beings. And then Kshemaraja says on this, I am all this. So, you see the Sanskrit? It in Shivoham Advitiyoham. Yes, of course we have no Kshemaraja in the Sanskrit. I am all this. This is called the highest samadhi, which is of the nature of the arising of pure wisdom, Shuddha Vidya, consisting in a state of the unity of subject and object. So this is already at the level of Shakta, and the arising of pure wisdom is connected with the 36 tattvas, that you have to pass through all the tattvas which are called impure. There are two levels of the 36 tattvas, that is Ashuddha and Shuddha tattvas. So at the impure tattvas end with Maya, and the pure tattvas start with Shuddha Vidya. Shuddha Vidya is a pure wisdom, which is actually just the other face of the same coin of Maya. See, Maya is not something substantial or anything. Maya is the same energy of the Lord, but in a veiled form. And when you turn that coin, the other face is Shuddha Vidya, is the pure wisdom. So the entering into the pure wisdom, into Shuddha Vidya, that is this corresponds to this level of samadhi. Now, the next one, this is known as the supreme samadhana, in which the perfect essential nature, one's own awareness, the nature of consciousness arising from one's own being, and the true nature of one's own experience are realized.
This one, I think, earthquake, space earthquake. I was thinking, what is it?
Spa.
Yes, I was searching.
Huh?
Bhukam.
They are saying they felt the earthquake, Bhukam. They felt the tremble. Most of them.
I couldn't see.
It's okay.
Not at all. No.
I was searching actually, I was seeing curtain there, you know, this, it is frames.
We had a very funny experience. Shikam and I, we were in Srinagar for a seminar at the university, and it was a seminar on Sufism and Shaivism and all that. And I had to give it. Most of the papers were on Sufism, and I and Nirja Mattu, we had on Shaivism. So I had to speak on Shaivism, and I went to the dais, and I started my speech, and there was an earthquake, and the whole building was, and people were running out. I just mentioned the word spanda. I said, but I hope I didn't. It was really it was the epicenter was in Afghanistan, but it felt very much felt in Srinagar. Which year it was? 16?
2016 maybe.
2016, yes. And so everybody was running out, and then there was a tremendous rainbow rising from the Dal Lake to the. It's not normally it's like this, but it was straight. So it was a tremendous. Some cosmic things were. And so after it had calmed down, we went back to the lecture hall, and I continued my paper. And I spoke about Spanda, of course. So it is the cosmic Spanda. So maybe it had something to do with the Anupaya. And Kshemaraja explains this by a perfect once and for all means the abode of consciousness flashes forth that which is the natural essence of consciousness, and that is Anupaya. And according to Kshemaraja's interpretation of this version of Samadhi, and that I didn't tell you this before on Anupaya, the characteristic of Anupaya that it is once and for all. They may have a darshan of a siddha and be very much enlightened, but if it is not a stable state which you attain, then it's not Anupaya. You've been maybe Shambhava, maybe even Shakta. So you have some saints or some sages, who have that experience it once and it is done, finished. They don't come back to the earlier state of consciousness. So this is the third. And then the fourth samadhi is, they are very similar, but still there's a subtle difference. This is known as samadhana. Samadhana, when one has discerned that through the mass of conscious and inert things, one realizes the immutable, eternal, everlasting state. This is very important because that consciousness is not separated from the material reality. Material reality is equally pervaded by consciousness. Otherwise we create a complete duality. The jarata. Normally we say there's a contrast between Chinmaya and Jara, the conscious and the unconscious and the inert and so on. But in this system, there's precisely this non-duality between the consciousness and the matter, consciousness and matter. So matter itself is pervaded by consciousness, and this is a realization which, samadhi is a way of realizing this unity. And that is where we have to deepen our consciousness to expand it and to experience. Many of you have also mentioned experiences that they become one with the tree, become one with the flower or with the animal, and so that you have an experience of that pervasiveness of consciousness in all material reality. So this is the fourth kind of samadhi, jarata. And here Kshemaraja says this mass of inner things consists of the worlds, the objects, the body, etc. And discerning skillfully in the middle of all this a state which is the support of the entire universe, reflecting carefully on that which is eternal, indestructible, everlasting, devoid of any change and alteration, whose nature is ever self-illumined and shines forth, that is known by the wise as samadhana. So this is the Shambhava state of samadhi. So they are variations on one theme, but with those subtle differences. So in experience, it can be differentiated. Like if that aspect of feeling the unity with all beings is dominant, or you have that experience, Shivoham, I am Shiva, I am without duality. That is another way. And here, in the last one, of experiencing that even the materiality, matter, is also pervaded by consciousness. Ne? Gito, you don't have?
We had a question we asked you, but my group can ask directly.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
I don't know that this is directly related, but this has always been reflected quite a lot by many people. The difference between the mukti and moksha.
No difference.
No difference at all.
No, it's the same.
Yes.
It's the same.
And chitta.
Oh, chit and chitta, there is a difference. Chit is pure consciousness, chitta is the mind.
And the other day is
No,
Turiya.
see, chit and chaitanya.
If she wants to.
The question we asked you that day, they want repeated again. Difference between Turiya and Turyatita.
Turyatita.
Yes. That we have already talked.
Yeah, in our group. But if you want, you can.
At
clarify
least in
again.
your
That's what
group.
Gitu
Please
says.
repeat it for all.
Gituji says that.
Oh, okay. Yes. Now, all these terms for consciousness, people who don't know Sanskrit, they get a little confused. Sorry.
Turiya means fourth.
Yeah. Yes. Now, I'm coming to Turiya and Turyatita, but about Chit and Chitta and Chaitanya and Samvit, it's important to know, even if you don't know Sanskrit, what are the implications of these terms for consciousness. Of course, the translation consciousness is also not satisfactory, but we don't have much choice in the English language. Now, Chit is pure consciousness, the same term is used in Vedanta, and Chaitanya is the very first Shiva Sutra, Chaitanyam Atma, is the reality of everything is consciousness. So Chaitanya and Chit are practically synonyms. And the third term, which is very frequent, is Samvit. Samvit is consciousness, and because it has the prefix sam, it is a synthetic consciousness. It is an inclusive consciousnness. That's why they prefer Samvit, because it corresponds more to the tantric spirituality, which is inclusive. So Samvit is very much used in our system. Now about Turiya and Turyatita, you want it? Yes. So we have in the whole of Indian psychology 4 states of consciousness. One is waking, Jagrat, sleep, dream, Swapna, and deep sleep, Sushupti. So this is common to all systems. Then from the Upanishads and Vedanta and Shaivism, there is a 4th state, which is Turiya, which is a transcendent state which you experience in Samadhi. And it's just called 4th because it goes beyond these 3 ordinary human states. Everybody has either waking or dream or sleep, so that is very common. But Turiya is that state which goes beyond those 3 and which is a transcendent state, or whatever you call it, which is practiced in meditation and samadhi. Then in Kashmir Shaivism mainly, a state of consciousness transcending the fourth. That's why it is called Turiya Atita, beyond the fourth. And how can you go beyond the fourth, which is already transcended? By coming back to all the other states of waking, dream and deep sleep, and integrating that transcendent consciousness into all the lower states of, whether it's in dream or in waking. And this is of course the characteristic of the Jiva Mukta, who has integrated that transcendental consciousness into all phases and states of life, of consciousness. So that is called Turiya Atita, transcending the fourth, but they don't call it fifth because there's no question of counting, but of transcending. Yeah, is that clear? Or is another question, related question?
Bettina ji,
Yes.
where does Tantra sit in this four level?
Hmm?
Tantra. T-A-N-D-R.
I couldn't.
T-A-N-D-R.
Tantra.
No.
Tantra.
Trance.
Tell me again.
Tantra. Nindra, Tantra.
Yeah.
Tantra.
T-A-N-D-R.
Yeah, I know.
But that's okay.
Is it in Sanskrit?
Tandra. T-A-N-D-R. D.
Tantra? I don't know.
That's, we don't use that term.
In Tantra, I think.
But it's only used in Kashmir. Turiya Atita is the only.
Do we have a context?
Where you got it?
I know, that's right.
Tantra means, I don't know what
Not
it
in
means.
Kashmir.
It's not in Kashmir.
What is it? Sanskrit?
Tantra.
Yeah, but what it is? I don't.
What is tongue in the first place?
It's not any. I have seen that.
तंद्रा
Yeah, but what is it?
बोलते
I have
निद्रा
seen that.
तंद्रा लग जाता है
The Tantra. It's it. Tantra.
हाँ
Tantra. Yes. Yes. Well, I have given 4 lectures to the monks in Chandra on Hindu Tantra on the request of Genje Rinpoche, who very kindly also translated my lectures into Tibetan for the monks. So all these 4 lectures were on Tantra. What is Tantra? What is the content, what the method, everything. And they are on my website.
it's this word dra
But Tantra is not
nindra tandra tandra is like sleep like a state
well, it is a kind of
Drowsy, over nidra, Tantra.
drowsiness बोलते हैं तंद्रा लग गया निंद्रा
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, please.
Yeah, please.
Sleep.
It was stated that enlightenment has no preconditions. However, it was also stated that great courage is necessary to receive enlightenment. So would this not be a precondition? Louder. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I'm just right next to it. I'm like, woo. So it's been stated that enlightenment has no preconditions.
Yes.
However, it's also been stated that the yogis are like heroes because they have great courage, and that great courage is necessary to receive enlightenment.
Yes.
So would that not be a precondition?
Well, that's a very good question.
Those questions in our group.
Yeah, the question is, of course, very relevant. See, the difference in the qualifications, first of all, qualification is, as you also say, is not always required. And you can have that experience without qualification. And there are many examples also in the texts and the stories about saints and about enlightened beings who, without being qualified, and they suddenly they get it. Now the question is, that is also maybe related with the question about karma. Is there any requirement for enlightenment? This is very... Because when Swamiji has translated this Mahasahasa as great courage, and the higher yogis, they are called Vira, hero. So there's definitely some quality has to be there of intensity. And what I have said many times in this is that the greatest obstacle to enlightenment or the spiritual life is laziness. So then in that sense your tantra may be laziness. Yes. Mediocrity, laziness, these are the real obstacles, and you cannot blame your parents or your karma or something. There is a free will. See, that's why Icha Shakti is so important as a condition for receiving that enlightenment. See, if there's no strong will also, see, nobody forces you to go for spirituality. Nobody forces you to search for enlightenment. There is a personal will. And that is, that Swamiji always stressed that. You have to be intensely seeking, intensely looking for that. That's why finding the center. In order to find it, you have to have an intensity of search. Sorry. So this is also our freedom. See, you're doing your spiritual practice, nobody forces you. But if you have that search and that intensity, and then so don't blame it on your karma, don't blame it on your parents or on your environment or on anybody. It is your own will of, this is to take a vow of bodhicitta. See, that vow, nobody forces you, but if you take that vow and you follow it up, and you're definitely here, you're searching for this, looking for the Jiva Mukti. It is an act of intensity, an act of seeking, and that's why you have all this mukshutva. See, in Vedanta also, unless you're searching for mukti, mukti will not be spoon-fed to you. You have to search for it. You have to be open and intensely eager to experience that. So let's not blame everything on karma. It is our own will. There are Icha Shakti, and the difference maybe from Buddhism is that Icha Shakti is the divine energy with which we unify our will. There's the Sutra and Shiva Sutra, Icha Shakti Uma Kumari. And it is very essential to make your will unified with the divine will. And that Icha Shakti is an energy. And that energy will drive you ultimately to enlightenment.
Is sudden grace also means that that intensity comes through the sudden grace also, or it is different from that?
Intensity comes?
From the sudden grace. That intensity that a person who has got a grace, that intensity should also be, there should be a grace for that.
Yes, of course. I mean, when you read about the upayas in Abhinavagupta, and the whole chapter on grace, there's a long chapter 13 in Tantra Loka, the different degrees of Shaktipata, of grace, depend on he makes it very clear. Even the search, it is from the very beginning, you go on the spiritual path. The first thing in the Indian tradition, maybe in other traditions also, first thing you search for a guru when you want to be on a spiritual path. And that very desire to search for a guru is already a sign of grace. And then suppose you find a guru who is not so much up to the mark and you feel, no, I have to go higher. And that desire, and he describes, and Abhinavagupta himself says, I also had some very bad gurus and I had to abandon them and go to higher, at the end of his commentary on Bhartajika. So when you discriminate that this guru doesn't lead me to my goal, and again it's an act of grace that you go to a higher guru. So everything is guided by grace until, of course, the more intense Shaktipata, Tiva, Aditiva, and so on, what we had it in the Vadula after. So it is a play between grace and intensity. It is so that's what I say, one should not deny the free will. If we want it, we will get it. So that intensity of wanting, of searching for that Madhya, and you will get it.
So is intensity a process or a state? The grace is a process or a state?
No, it is a quality.
It's a quality.
It's a quality of the mind, of the soul, of whatever your being.
But it is still there. It is still, the grace is there. It's always there.
Yes. But it depends on your.
But you have to go through certain processes for that. Then you can reach to that quality. That's where the intensity quality and this. There are process quality and you can put a state. So we can reach to that state. My question is a little bit confusing here, but I am even. Let me put like this. So we do a certain kinds of yoga and meditation, whatever we call it. We go through a certain kind of processes. So does that also belong to that comes from that grace only?
Yes. But again, it is an interplay between.
But it will be the same for everyone then.
You see, it's different for everyone. There.
I'm not sure this is a question, but this is something I was wondering about. That's the relationship between Icha Shakti and Bhakti. Because Bhakti is it just mentioned a little bit around the seminar in Madhya, in Seva Panchashika, if I remember correctly. But I kind of feel like Icha Shakti is somehow rising from Bhakti, and courage also, for me, somehow feels like it's very closely connected to the Bhakti of the yogi.
Yes, very good question. And I think at least we had one passage, maybe in the Netra, that without bhakti there is no yoga also. So you must have that devotion to your practice. And devotion to the divine, is, of course, it is one way, which is very much here because it is Shaiva, and so that why bhakti actually belongs to Shambhava Pride. And this bhakti is at the highest. And it's not the dualistic bhakti. Now the difference between people who go to the temple and do puja to a devotee, and that is kind of dualistic. Here I'm either devotee and that is my deity. But this non-dualistic bhakti, which we have done a whole seminar on that, Advaita Bhakti, is called Para Bhakti. The Para Bhakti is non-dualistic, and that is at the level of Shambhava, because there it's the divine, him or herself, who is acting. And here I can give you a parting present. We are not yet finished, but still I want to distribute this to all of you, because you have raised this question. Shivastutravali, where Utpaladeva expresses what I think we all feel, or we feel the need. But the Sanskrit is also there. Dwelling in the midst of the sea of the supreme ambrosia, with my mind immersed solely in the worship of you, may I attend to all the common occupations of man, savoring the ineffable in everything. So this is a kind of verse, you take it home, and the Sanskrit is there, and the commentary is also there. Nivasam Paramam Rita Apti Madhya, and here we have Madhya, in the middle of that ocean of nectar, supreme nectar, Bhavat Archa Vidhi Matram Magna Chitta, with my mind completely merged in that. Sakalam Jana Vritta Achareyam. Jana Vritta is the ordinary activities of men. Rasayam Sarvata Eva Kinchanapi. They attend to all the common occupations of man, savoring the ineffable in everything. So you can distribute this page.
Same as Nirgun Bhakti. Does it come to Nirgun?
Let's take one.
The Nirgun.
Where's the mic?
Mike.
Will Bhakti come under the Nirgun?
Will it come under the Nirgun? This type of the Para Bhakti, does it come to the Nirgun Bhakti? Is it the same?
Para Bhakti, yeah.
And Nirguna Bhakti.
And the Nirguna.
Nirguna. Well, Nirguna is a specific tradition which is addressing the Nirguna aspect of the divinity. And whether it is non-dualistic, I cannot say. I mean, the divinity definitely is Nirguna, but it may not be non-dualistic. There may be still a devotee and the object of devotion. I think so, but I'm not fully in that tradition. Yes?
And is Parabhakti the source of grace, or are they connected somehow?
Parabhakti is the result of grace.
It's the result of grace. Oh yes.
Yes. It's the result of grace. Tomorrow morning we still have the time for sharing. It was good, I think many things came up, and I think now we should go to our meditation. And
but because Bhakti has been told, I think if you see the story of some of the great Saivite devotees,
yes,
especially if you see the Ramanas Pere Puranam and all that, it's like the bhakti is a key for that grace which overcomes all karmas.
Yes,
It is a spontaneous thing that comes for people who are literally having so much of bad karma, who are doing bad karma and everything, but suddenly that bhakti opens and instantly, spontaneously they get that grace and illumination. So it looks like bhakti has a very important way to override karma.
Yes, definitely.
That's right, it's a very relevant one which we asked.
So I think we conclude this session. Thank you very much, and we go for meditation. And so tomorrow morning we have one short part on the heart, Hridaya, and then we have a sharing of your experience and what you have found, finding the center, what you have found in these days. We conclude again with Prakashamani.